I have a gentleman who was part of the regulatory agency, and he worked as an auditor. And, that's
a real insider.
Yeah, it's invaluable. It's invaluable to have someone who can, so he can come in and look at my program and then say, well, look, from the template perspective, we can fix this, we can fix that, or this is good.
And the average power plant, how could they have that kind of resource?
Well, they're going to only get that when they're doing an audit.
Yeah.
And that's not the time that you want to get that experience.
Right. You don't want to get that bad news then.
Yeah, that's not when you want that feedback. You want that feedback at the beginning of the process when you're building your policies or your procedures.
The world of energy and the technology shaping it. I'm Josh Tate, and this is Between Two Turbines. Sean Thompson, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I wanted to start with first, what brought you to NAES? And just tell me your time in the industry and everything leading up to this point.
Oh, sure. Well, I've been with NAES for almost 20 years. This is my 19th year. Before I joined NAES, I was a nuclear power plant operator.
Really?
In the United States Navy.
Oh, very cool.
So I spent 6 years on an aircraft carrier operating a nuclear power plant. And then when I got out of the Navy, I went and did that job commercially.
Yeah.
It was on the East Coast. I'm originally from just down the road from here. I live, 5 minutes from the headquarters here in Issaquah.
Right.
And I wanted to move back home. And, the power jobs were a little bit far and few between.
Totally.
And NAES was a very interesting opportunity for me. And so I got a job here at NAES, and I started, at that time we were working to capture information from people who were retiring and develop procedures for them. And so I started working at NAES and writing procedures, operations procedures. I travel around the country, go to a power plant, talk to the operators, see how they operate the plant, document it, build out a procedure so that the next person could do it. And that led me to, in 2007, NERC became an official regulation, federally mandated regulation. We had one gentleman that was working across the entire NAES fleet, and I took a lateral transition to enter into that industry. I thought, well, this looks like it has some legs, and I could probably make a career out of this. And 18 years later, here I am doing NERC compliance.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cool journey. I think going back to the Navy and nuclear, does the nuclear thing ever bother you?
No, but I think it's a fun thing to joke about with people.
Yeah. It's once I heard in my mind the nuclear, it's never been the same since, and it always sticks out to me. So, the nuclear story, I talked with Alan recently kind of about some of the history, and I just find it so interesting how we've made these different transitions, and it seems like we kind of stepped away from the nuclear, the new technologies that we're moving to in the future, just understanding some of the intricate problems of, how the transmission system is, over 100 years old.
Yes.
You're doing the NERC side of things now.
Sure.
And, tell me about what that looks like day to day. You go in, you're working with the plant operators, you're writing up the procedures. What does that look like, and what problem does that solve? I imagine running these plants is pretty complicated.
Well, there are two different types of NERC standards. So we have a group of standards called our operations and planning standards that specifically detail how you maintain equipment at your facility. How do you know the ratings of the equipment that you have? How are you coordinating with other players on the grid, planning coordinators, balancing authorities? And then we have another section, it's cybersecurity. It's called CIP compliance, CIP, and I manage a group of folks that works in that cybersecurity arena. And so really what it looks like is we'll go out to one of our facilities or anybody's facility, honestly, and we'll do an evaluation of your compliance posture.
Do you have any horror stories Anything that you've seen that is like, oh man, we got to jump in here?
Oh, we see that. I think it's interesting because there's an intent for the standards.
Sure.
They're
probably kind of complicated too.
Yeah, they are complicated. And so some of them are very simple, or
Sure.
they look very simple, and
Right,
they
right.
might not be quite so simple in the application. And so there's a lot of times where you can kind of put together a paper dragon and meet the language of the requirements, but not really meet the intent of the requirements. Right. And so,
it's nobody's necessarily, a bad guy. They're not. It's just something that you might not know unless it's explained clearly to you.
No, that's right. As far as regulatory agencies go, 20 years isn't a very long time to actually establish controls and regulations. And so I would think that, NERC has kind of passed its baby stage and they're growing into a more mature regulatory structure. But there's still a lot of folks, in our industry at NAES Corporation, we operate a lot of independent power producers, right? And so the staff may have 2 or 3 years ago worked for a different company, and they, so over 20 years you might work for 3 or 4 different ownership groups, and those different ownership groups might have a different take on how important those different regulations are to them inside of their organization.
A different take.
Yeah, sure. Like, so, you can value, you have different values that you associate to some of these standards. And so you might have an owner who they just want to sell that power plant in a year and a half, and they're not going to put in a lot of money to go deal with regulations or deal with issues.
Yeah, something that ends up biting you in the butt later.
Yeah, and when they know that they're going to go sell it. And so
sure.
What will happen is an owner will hire NAES. We'll go staff the plant to go operate it, and we'll go uncover those skeletons. And it's, usually it's not good enough for us just to sit and say, well, you have skeletons in your closet. We want to go and look at how we can, pull them out, put processes in place so that we are meeting the intent of the regulation, not just the language of the regulation. And then that adds value for our clients. They look and they go, okay, well now, we're not going to get a penalty.
So we're like inspectors.
Yeah, our team is larger than that. So we'll do an inspection, we'll step in, we'll go evaluate your system. But then, on the back end, we've developed programs and policies for each of these regulations that we have in a template format that we can go and implement at your facility. And so I might come to your facility and say, okay, well, here's the picture of health at your facility. You're missing these 3 things. One of them we think is a bigger concern. And at the same time, I would say, well, now I would go and implement this tool or this process that we have to go close that gap.
Yeah. Sometimes I see these videos of people inspecting homes after they're built.
Those are great.
New builds. I don't know if you ever see
sci-fi.
those. Yeah. And I wonder if it's similar to NAES. Like not all inspectors are the same,
Sure.
Really having the attention to detail and the experience. We've been doing this since NERC began.
Yes.
And so I wonder, does that give us an edge? I mean, I don't want to be biased, but does it?
Oh, it 100% does. On my team, I have a gentleman who was part of the regulatory agency, and he worked as an auditor. And that's
a real insider.
Yeah, it's invaluable to have someone who can come in and look at my program and then say, well, look, from the template perspective, we can fix this, we can fix that, or this is good.
And the average power plant, how could they have that kind of resource?
Well, they're going to only get that when they're doing an audit.
Yeah.
And that's not the time that you want to get that experience. Right.
You don't want to get that bad news then.
Yeah, that's not when you want that feedback. You want that feedback at the beginning of the process when you're building your policies or your procedures so that you can go put them into place. And then when they get audited, it's a minor thing that you have to change or it's a small shift that you have to make to be compliant, not implementing the entire thing.
I can imagine that conversation can be a little rough. Like, hey, we didn't catch this soon enough.
Sure.
You should have brought us in maybe beforehand.
Well, and with these cybersecurity regulations, there's a lot of hardware infrastructure that needs to be installed. There's costs associated with this, and so if I walk in to your after I've been working with you to set up your power plant for a year and a half, and I tell you you're going to owe me $100,000 a year to pay for a software subscription, whatever it is, that's a pretty tough one to take, right? And so, but if we talk about that at the beginning, it's a lot easier to prepare for those costs and those expenditures as we're, becoming mature in our programs.
Yeah, definitely. Surprises are never fun.
No.
And that's why you got to be proactive with this type of thing.
Sure.
In my mind, and I'm just a marketer, so I think about these things. Is it just Russia, China that we're trying to defend against, or what is the kind of threat that power plants really face?
We don't really think about the critical infrastructure, I think, is a thing, right? And so what we expect is when we flip a light switch, that the lights come on.
Yeah.
Right. And these 20 years ago, power plants are not just power plants, but our general infrastructure wasn't as interconnected as it is right now. And so you're operating a power plant. You have a control system that is connecting your pumps, your compressors, your turbines, and maybe it's talking and sharing a little bit of data to someone outside of your power plant, but it was largely, isolated to your facility. And that's not the world that we live in right now. We live in an interconnected world. And every time we interconnect another device to a network, that creates a security.
Right. It's a new pathway.
That's right. It's a new pathway for us to have to deal with. And so,
doesn't that make it hard though? It seems like there's 1,000 different ways you could. I mean, I've heard of people leaving thumb drives in a parking lot, and people pick them up, put them, and then they're in.
Well, it's when you ask, is it about Russia? Is it about China? Is it about North Korea? Is it about Iran? Well, yeah, those are state-sponsored actors, and their intent is to see if they can get into our infrastructure, lay in wait, and then use a virus, some malware to shut your system down so that the critical infrastructure isn't functioning.
Yeah.
And that's really their intent is, how do we make it so that you can't operate this power plant? How do we turn the lights off for these hospitals?
I would imagine at some of these plants, it would be unnerving to be that plant that did get, breached.
Yes.
And easy enough for me to say, but I would want to do whatever I could to prevent that.
Well, I think it's interesting because when we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about having an IT and an OT system, and they're typically very separated. And there's a separation between them, but they're both critical to the operation of our power plants. If we can't, the IT system might have some financial data that's associated with it. It's got the day-to-day operations. We've been working to secure IT systems, I think, a little bit longer than we have OT systems.
Sure. And
it wasn't until the NERC standards came out where we started to build a framework for cybersecurity around the OT systems. Now we have a real framework. It's established. We understand a little bit more what we have to protect,
right?
And we can put ourselves in a position where maybe we can catch, if we're not trying to meet the intent of the standard, not just meet the language. We can put some controls in place that are going to possibly detect those attacks in the beginning. More importantly, if we do get attacked, be able to restore our system to where it was before the attack. And then, we have systems in place also to share that information now so that we can prevent other entities and companies from having to experience that same attack.
Yeah. So, I mean, on some of the particulars around the security, maybe I think of a security guard as being part of it. Is there an aspect of physical and cybersecurity?
Sure. Yeah. NERC makes us, the first thing NERC makes us do is identify which cyber assets that we have to protect. right? And so, I think that was a big thing when it started was, okay, well, look, we need to understand what we need to protect and what is critical to the operation of our facility. And so we can't do that without having both electronic and physical security. And so, I think does that mean that you have to have a gate on your power plant? No, not necessarily. We would ideally be able to pull those assets into a building that we'd be able to lock, secure access to.
Sure.
We want people to know who's going in there. So, we want to be able to authorize access to those types of spaces. But we're going to do the same thing. It's not just physical entry. Right now, one of our biggest concerns is people having remote access, whether they're vendors or people who work at the facility, and then having that access compromised. I think also sometimes people think about cyber attacks, they think it's a big complicated, that there's somebody on a computer on the back end that's like trying to get in. That's not the case. It's like you said, someone leaves a thumb drive that's out here, or
it's some common sense stuff.
Yeah, it's an email. It's a phishing email where someone's trying to steal credentials so that they don't have to do the hard stuff. They're going to get your information. They're just going to go type in your password.
Right. I think we envision that hacker in a dark room pounding, on the keyboard rapidly, but really it's an email with it. They have the right logos and names, and maybe it's one character off. Yeah. And maybe you don't realize that it's hyperlinked because they changed the formatting, and then it's really, you have to get clever with it. I think about those early emails of some prince from some country in
Sure.
Europe or Asia or something, and back then it seemed plausible, but we got to get smarter.
Well, and now we at NAES, I know, and a lot of other companies, we try to simulate phishing attacks on our employees.
I failed those before. Unfortunately,
those simulated phishing attacks are very, very convincing.
Yeah, especially when my boss's name is included, because I better open this and respond right away.
I just got one. I literally had just had a DocuSign sent to me by my boss, and I signed it, and I got another email right after that from our phishing our service provider, and I was like, oh yeah, I just did this, and I clicked on it, and so even
you think an IT person is pumping their fist right now?
Yeah, that's a win.
Yeah.
Well, because part of this, we talk about physical security. We talk about electronic security in the NERC standards, but we also talk about personnel training and having tools to make sure that you're providing this cybersecurity awareness training so that people know, don't click on that link. Don't share your credentials with anybody.
Definitely.
Maybe if you're in the airport doing work, get a screen protector so that people can't stand behind you and get your information. I think we think a lot of times about the high-tech ways that people can get at us, but a lot of it's just being careful with your information.
Definitely. Well, I think what I want to end with is just tell me why you think what NAES does and what we offer is of value. Why should a power plant come to us for SIP, for this critical infrastructure protection?
Well, I think one of the best things about this company is we have so much exposure with the amount of power plants that we operate. And so if something happened, we've probably seen it happen. Beyond that, we engage frequently with the regional auditors. And so we know what a self-certification looks like. We know what the auditors are going to ask for when we're auditing things. And we build out our programs in a way to incorporate that. And so if I go to power plant A and I have an audit, it gets shared across 140 other power plants, those lessons learned. And I think that's a real value that most folks at a power plant don't have. They're not working in an environment that has that big of a pool to gather information from. My team we've got 23 people working in our NERC department, 24 people working in our NERC department. They focus solely on regulatory compliance. They have time to track the new things that are coming along, what changes are happening. When you're at a power plant and you're typically this compliance is not your only job.
Sure.
Right. Your primary concern is making electricity, having that electricity bring money into the owner.
Sure.
Right. And then this is a additional responsibility.
Yeah.
You're not going to have time to go track what people are learning in audits.
Sure.
And then when that audit does come, it's gonna be a second job. It's gonna take 80, 100, 200 hours of your time, depending on how complicated it is, to go and provide documentation to the auditor. All of that with the risk of a fine at the back end if you didn't do it right in the front. NAES can give you those assurances that it's been looked at. It passes the sniff test. And it's going to work for your facility. And so I think that's the real value there.
And it's people that really do care about the job.
All the way.
And it's, we have the people working at the plants and we have the people working with the compliance. We have a spread. It's the amount of knowledge that's held within the company. I think we really understand how it affects, some of these plants on the other side. And I really appreciate you coming in today and love talking with you.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. It's cool.